In the luxurious mansion on the outskirts of Munich, where the well-kept gardens contrasted with the typical grey skies of the German autumn, lived the Müllers. Hans Müller, a car businessman and owner of the prestigious Müller Motors, was known as much for his business genius as for his simplicity. His wife, Greta Müller, on the other hand, personified the arrogance that money can bring. Among the staff at the mansion was Klara Weber, a 45-year-old widow and cleaner who worked tirelessly to support her 2 children who were studying at the University of Berlin. With kind eyes and hands weathered by hard work, Klara kept every corner of the mansion spotless, even under Greta's ever-critical and cruel gaze. One particularly hectic morning, as the mansion was preparing for an important business dinner, fate decided to weave its web of events. Greta, dressed in a Chanel suit and her usual extravagant jewelry, oversaw the preparations with her usual disdain. Klara was cleaning the valuable Ming vase in the main hall when Greta came in, talking loudly on the phone about how difficult it was to find competent servants these days. The crucial moment came when Greta deliberately bumped into Klara, causing her to almost drop the vase. "Incompetent girl, how dare you risk a piece that is worth more than you would earn in 10 lifetimes?" Greta shouted, while the other employees watched the scene paralyzed. "You are nothing more than an ignorant cleaner who is lucky to be allowed to clean the floors I walk on." What nobody expected was that this moment of public humiliation would reveal a secret that would change the lives of everyone in the house forever. Hans Müller, who had arrived early from the office, witnessed the whole scene from the top of the stairs. His normally calm face showed a mixture of disappointment and determination. Klara, with tears in her eyes but maintaining her dignity, simply held the vase tighter and continued her work. However, an envelope that fell out of her uniform pocket caught everyone's attention. An envelope containing documents that would reveal a long-hidden truth about Klara's true identity and her connection to the Müller family. The yellowing envelope that fell from Klara's pocket contained old Müller family documents, including a sepia photograph of a young woman who looked strikingly like Greta, standing next to Hans's father, the late Wilhelm Müller. The resemblance was uncanny, but what was even more shocking was the date. 1975, exactly when the family business began its meteoric rise. Hans slowly descended the stairs, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble. His face showed a gradual recognition, as if the pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle were beginning to fit together. Greta, sensing the change in atmosphere, tried to snatch the documents from Klara's trembling hands, but Hans stopped her with a firm gesture. "These documents, I recognize them from my father's safe," Hans said, his voice charged with emotion. "Klara, you're not just our cleaner. Are you?" The question hung in the air like a cloud. Klara, still trembling, but now standing more upright, revealed the truth that she had been hiding for decades. She was the illegitimate daughter of Wilhelm Müller and one of the factory workers, Helena Weber. The affair had been kept secret to protect the family's reputation, but Wilhelm had never completely abandoned his daughter, making sure she was always close by, even if it was in secret. Realizing the implications of this revelation, Greta completely lost control. "This is absurd, a conspiracy. This cleaning lady is trying to extort us." Her hysterical screams echoed throughout the mansion, while the other employees looked on in amazement. But Hans already knew. Deep down, he had always known that there was something familiar in Klara's eyes, the same eyes as her father. Wilhelm's frequent visits to the personnel department, his peculiar interest in the well-being of certain families. Now it all made sense. The irony was that Greta, who had so despised Klara for her social status, now found herself face with her sister-in-law, the rightful heir to the Müller fortune. The documents included not only Klara's birth certificate, but also Wilhelm's never-before-revealed will, in which he recognized her as his daughter. and guaranteed her share of the inheritance. The tension in the room was palpable. The employees, who for years had witnessed Greta's cruel treatment of Klara, were now witnessing a turn of events that no one could have predicted. Hans, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his moral duty to his newfound sister, had a crucial decision to make. The following days at the Müller mansion were marked by suffocating tension. Hans, now aware that he had a sister, began to piece together the puzzle of his past through long conversations with Klara in the mansion's study. Each word exchanged revealed more about the complex web of secrets that his father had woven. Klara told how her mother, Helena, had made her promise on her deathbed never to reveal her true identity unless it was absolutely necessary. Helena had loved Wilhelm deeply, but understood that her love had to remain in the shadows to protect the Müller empire. Klara's decision to work as a cleaner in the mansion was no coincidence. It was a way of staying close to the only family she had left. Greta, for her part, became a walking time bomb. Her fits of rage became more frequent and were directed not only at Klara, but at anyone who showed sympathy for the situation. Her main concern was not the moral of the story, but how it would affect her social position and, above all, her share of the Müller fortune. The household staff, led by the housekeeper Frau Schmidt, who had served the family for 3 decades, began to reveal little details they had always known. How Wilhelm always made sure that Klara received the best medical care when she fell ill, or how he secretly paid for his children's education through an anonymous fund. The relationship between Hans and Greta deteriorated with each new revelation. During a particularly tense dinner, Greta let slip that she had always suspected something because she had found old photographs in Wilhelm's office, but that she had chosen to ignore them in order to maintain their luxurious lifestyle. This confession was the last straw for Hans. "Did you know? All this time you knew I had a sister, and you decided not to tell me." Hans' voice trembled with contained rage. "While you humiliated her knowing who she was?" But the real shock came when Klara revealed her final piece of evidence, a diary belonging to Wilhelm that detailed not only his relationship with Helena, but also a series of suspicious financial transactions in which Greta was involved even before her marriage to Hans. The diary suggested that Greta had manipulated her entry into the Müller family through blackmail and lies. A silent network of support for Klara formed among the employees. Each had their own story of humiliation at the hands of Greta, and now, as the truth came out, they finally felt avenged. Chef Helga began preparing Klara's favorite dishes, while gardener Otto started decorating her small back room with the most beautiful flowers from the garden. On a stormy night, typical of the German autumn, the Müller mansion became the scene of a confrontation that would change everyone's destiny forever. During a charity dinner organized by Greta, attended by the cream of Munich society, the inevitable happened. Greta, drunk on champagne and bitterness, decided to make a toast. With her crystal glass raised, she began to tell a story that she swore was hilarious. How she had discovered years ago that the insignificant cleaner was in fact Müller's bastard, and how she had amused herself by making his life hell. Her laughter echoed around the room as the guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. What Greta hadn't expected was that Hans had secretly invited the members of the board of directors of Müller Motors to that same dinner. Among them was Dr. Weber, a respected corporate lawyer who, to everyone's surprise, stood up and revealed that he was the son of Klara, the same one Greta had mocked for begging for a scholarship. The silence was deafening. Hans stood up and made his own announcement. In the last few days, a full audit had been carried out revealing that Greta had been embezzling company money for years through a network of shell companies. The money she used to maintain her lavish lifestyle did not come only from the Müller fortune, but from an elaborate fraud scheme. Klara, who was waiting tables as usual that night, stopped in the middle of the room, a tray of canapes in her hand. Her eyes met Greta's, not with hatred or revenge, but with a mixture of pity and relief. It was at that moment that Hans asked her to join the main table, no longer as a maid, but as a member of the Müller family. The scene that followed was chaotic. Greta, realizing that her castle of lies was crumbling, tried to flee the room, but was prevented from doing so by the security guards that Hans had strategically placed. In her desperate flight, she stumbled and fell, spilling her glass of champagne. On her €15,000 Versace dress, one last public humiliation. But the real surprise was yet to come. Among the documents Hans presented was a letter from Wilhelm Müller, addressed to Klara, dated 1 week before his death. In it, in addition to a formal acknowledgement of paternity, there were specific instructions regarding a secret bank account in Switzerland, an account containing the true inheritance he had set aside for his illegitimate daughter. The transformation at the Müller mansion was as dramatic as it was immediate. Greta was taken from the residence, under the watchful eyes of the guests still present, while the financial crime police arrived discreetly from the back. The press, which had so flattered the elegant Mrs. Müller, was now buzzing with headlines about her downfall. Klara, still coming to terms with events, suddenly found herself in a completely different world. Hans insisted that she move to the east wing of the mansion, traditionally reserved for close family members. However, she maintained her characteristic humility, at first reluctant to accept the sudden changes in her life. In the weeks that followed, the staff at the mansion witnessed an even more profound transformation. Klara, now officially recognized as Klara Weber, began to actively participate in the management of the family business, bringing a unique perspective formed by years of observing the house and its inhabitants from an angle that no one else knew. Her son, Dr. Weber, turned out to be a brilliant business strategist. Together with Hans, they undertook significant changes at Müller Motors, including a revolutionary benefits program for employees and their families. Klara's experience as a worker brought a human dimension that the company had never taken into account. The mansion, once a symbol of oppression and class division, was transformed into an environment of harmony and mutual respect. Klara insisted on keeping some of the old employees in positions of trust, recognizing their loyalty during the difficult years. Frau Schmidt, the housekeeper, was promoted to general administrator of the estate, and her first measure was to establish a code of conduct that guaranteed dignified treatment for all employees. The most emotional moment came when Klara finally entered Wilhelm's old office. Hans had kept everything exactly as his father had left it. There, in a secret drawer that only the real Müllers knew about, they found a photo album documenting secret moments in Klara's life. Her first day at school, graduations, even the births of her children. Wilhelm, although he kept his distance, had never stopped following his daughter's life. This discovery made Hans reflect deeply on the nature of family love and the masks that society forces us to wear. On a particularly emotional evening, the siblings shared memories of their father, each filling in the gaps in the other's story, finally realizing how complex Wilhelm had been. The big moment of confrontation came during the annual meeting of Müller Motors. The luxurious auditorium at the Munich headquarters was packed with shareholders, executives, and the trade press. Greta, who had been released on bail, unexpectedly showed up, accompanied by her lawyers, demanding her share in the company. The atmosphere became even tenser when she presented documents that supposedly proved that Wilhelm had been blackmailed by Helena, Klara's mother, suggesting that the secret love story was nothing more than a deception. Her lawyers argued that all recognition of Klara as heiress should be annulled. At that moment, Klara calmly stood up. From her briefcase, she took out an old tape recorder that had belonged to her mother. With trembling hands, she pressed play. Wilhelm Müller's voice filled the auditorium in a recording made weeks before his death. In it, he not only confirmed his love for Helena, but also revealed that he had been aware of Greta's plans from the beginning. He had kept evidence as collateral in case she ever tried to harm any member of his family. "My dear Klara," Wilhelm's emotional voice said in the recording, "if you are listening to this, it means that the moment of truth has finally arrived. Forgive me for not having been brave enough in life, but I hope you understand that every decision I made was to protect you. Greta is not who she appears to be. She built her position on threats and manipulation." The recording went on to reveal specific details of Greta's frauds, including dates, amounts, and names of fictitious companies. Her face paled when she realized that all her movements had been documented by her late father-in-law. Hans, who until then had remained silent, stood up and announced the unanimous decision of the board. Greta would be officially removed from any position in the company, and criminal proceedings would be initiated to recover the embezzled funds. More importantly, Klara would be officially presented as the director of the new social responsibility department at Müller Motors. The most shocking moment, however, came when the company's employees, from workers to managers, began to stand up one by one, applauding Klara. Many of them told stories of how she, even as a cleaner, had always treated them with dignity and respect, often intervening discreetly to help them in difficult times. Amid the commotion of the assembly, an old man rose from the back of the auditorium. It was Heinrich Weber, the former accountant of Müller Motors, who everyone thought had been retired for years. His wrinkled face bore the weight of decades of secrets, and his presence caused an immediate silence in the room. Heinrich revealed that he had not only witnessed the love between Wilhelm and Helena, but also kept an even more shocking secret. Greta was not who she said she was. Through a thorough investigation of the old records, he discovered that she had falsified her own identity. Her real name was Margaret Schultz, a former employee of a Swiss bank who had stolen the identity of the real Greta von Hessen, a young aristocrat who had died in a car accident years before. The face of Greta Margaret contorted into a mask of fury and despair. With a sudden movement, she took a gun out of her designer handbag and pointed it directly at Klara. "If I lose everything, so will you," she shouted in a trembling voice. At that critical moment, something extraordinary happened. The security guards advanced, but they were preceded by an unexpected figure, an elegant lady of about 70, who entered the auditorium leaning on a cane. She was the real mother of Greta, von Hessen, Baroness Elisabeth von Hessen, whom Hans had secretly contacted after the first discoveries. The presence of the Baroness completely destabilized Margaret Greta. "You're dead. Everyone told me that the whole family had died in that accident," she stammered, the gun trembling in her hands. "Only my daughter Greta was in the car that night," replied the Baroness in a firm voice. "And now, after all these years, I finally understand why so many documents disappeared from the bank where she kept our family archives." The revelation of this last piece of the puzzle caused Margaret to collapse completely. The gun fell from her trembling hands as she slumped into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The security guards immediately arrested her, this time not only for financial fraud, but also for perjury and attempted murder. The outcome of the events at Müller Motors unleashed a wave of changes that no one could have foreseen. Margaret Schultz, the fake Greta, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for her crimes, including fraud, perjury, and attempted murder. During the trial, it was discovered that she had meticulously planned her infiltration of the Müller family for more than 2 decades. Baroness von Hessen, moved by Klara's story and impressed by her dignity in the face of such cruelty, decided to stay in Munich. In Klara, she found the daughter she had lost so many years before, and the two formed a close and affectionate relationship. The aristocrat began to regularly attend Sunday lunches at the Müller mansion, bringing with her stories and traditions from an almost forgotten era. Hans, finally free of the burden of his toxic marriage, set about rebuilding not only family ties, but also the company's reputation. Under the joint leadership of the Müller siblings, the company launched a revolutionary employee welfare program, including profit sharing and scholarships for the children of workers. Klara's old maid's room was transformed into a memorial, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a symbol of resilience and dignity. The walls were decorated with photographs chronicling her journey from her days as a cleaner to her current position as director and shareholder of the company. The Müller mansion, once an environment of oppression and social divisions, became a place of meeting and celebration. Former employees were promoted to positions of trust, and new hires were hired based on a strict code of ethics that prioritized mutual respect above any title or position. The most significant moment came when Klara inaugurated the Wilhelm Müller Foundation, dedicated to supporting working families and promoting vocational training. In her inaugural speech, she did not mention a word of revenge or resentment. Instead, she spoke of transformation, forgiveness, and the importance of using power and wealth to create opportunities for others. 5 years have passed since the events that transformed the life of the Müller family. The mansion, once a symbol of social division, has become a cultural center where regular charity events and educational programs for low-income youth are held. Klara, now a respected businesswoman, has never forgotten her origins. Every Monday, she continues to prepare breakfast for the mansion's employees, a tradition that began in her days as a cleaner. Her office, located exactly where the former maid's room used to be, always has its door open to any employee who needs help. Hans found love again, this time with a literature professor at the University of Munich, whom he met during one of the Foundation's events. Their wedding was a simple celebration in the garden of the mansion, to which all the employees were invited as family, not as servants. Baroness von Hessen, who became a constant presence in everyone's life, set up a fund to support victims of identity theft, inspired by the tragedy of her real daughter. In Klara, she found not only a friend, but a partner in her mission to turn tragedies into opportunities to help others. Margaret Schultz, the fake Greta, is serving her sentence in a medium-security prison. According to reports, she has started giving talks to other inmates about the consequences of greed and manipulation. Klara, in an act of compassion that surprised many, set up a fund to ensure that she has access to psychological treatment. Müller Motors has become an example of humanized management in Germany. The scholarship program created by Klara has already benefited more than 1,000 children of employees, and several of them have returned to the company as executives and specialists. One autumn afternoon, similar to the one that changed everything, Klara found an old diary belonging to her mother Helena. On the last pages was a letter she had never sent to Wilhelm. True love does not need public recognition to be real. Our daughter has the best of both of us, and one day the world will see the greatness in her. The story of the cleaning lady turned director is no longer told with astonishment or sensationalism. Instead, it has become a reminder that true nobility does not reside in titles or fortunes, but in the decisions we make and in the way we treat others, regardless of their social position. At the entrance to the Wilhelm Müller Foundation, a discreet plaque bears a message that sums up the transformation. Here everyone is worthy of respect, because true wealth lies in character, not titles.